Well, welcome everybody to the Wilmette Institute's third web talk of 2017. We have Hooshmand Badee speaking today. Is there a Baha'i economic system? A topic that has become extremely timely because of this message of the Universal House of Justice that came out just a week or so ago regarding the subject of economics. I think I will start, though, a little bit here by just reminding everybody what the Wilmette Institute is, and then from there we'll go to an introduction of Hooshmand. The Wilmette Institute is now a little over 21 years old. It was established in January of 1995 by a decision of the National Spiritual Assembly. And for 10 years we ran a face-to-face program, the Spiritual Foundations for a Global Civilization program, that also included an online component. And because it included an online component, and the experience we gained from that, we decided to begin online courses in 1998. At that time, there was fairly limited software. And it says, since then, we've been able to do 403 courses, and we've had, according to our Excel spreadsheet, 10,935 registrations. Of course, some people have taken up to 20 courses, and that's counting each person course. So that includes some people multiple times. Something like 119 countries have been represented in our student body, and those learners have done countless presentations about aspects of the Baha'i Faith or Baha'i topics one way or another to all kinds of audiences, classes, study circles, and feasts, over the radio. We've heard really quite a variety of efforts people have made using our course materials and the experience they gained from the courses. In addition to our courses, we're now also doing web talks, such as this one today. We're beginning to do webinars, which are courses people pay for, which are primarily driven by video, live video content. But we're also on our website doing publication of PowerPoints and articles by students and faculty. And of course, we're now moving in the direction of offering courses potentially for college credit. We're still working on a relationship with a seminary, and we hope pretty soon to have a finalized decision about that, and at which point, of course, we'll make an announcement to people what we've been able to arrange for. Today we're going to hear Hooshmand Badee talking about the Baha'i economic system. Hooshmand is an academic economist with a PhD in Baha'i economics, which he received from the University of Leeds in England. He's authored 3 books on Baha'i economics, the most recent one being Principles of Spiritual Economics, which you can purchase through Amazon.com. He's also given many academic papers at international conferences. He was born in Iran, has traveled around the world quite a bit, living in Bangladesh, Canada, and the Caribbean, has served on a National Spiritual Assembly, I believe, down in the Caribbean, and now lives in Scotland, where they are not on daylight saving time, whereas we are here, so that was an interesting discovery when we were setting this call up. He's married with 3 children and 4 grandchildren. So at this point, we will turn things over to Hooshmand's screen.
Well, thank you, and let me also welcome everyone to this presentation. It is a pleasure for me to be able to share some of my thoughts with you, and I hope it will be useful. Of course, the purpose of this presentation is not to solve economic problems of the world in next 45 minutes, but to be aware of some alternative methods that are suggested in the Baha'i writings. In a very timely statement of the Supreme Governing Body of the Baha'i Faith, the Universal House of Justice, dated 1st March 2012, just 12 days ago, we read the vision of Bahá'u'lláh challenges many of the assumptions that are allowed to shape contemporary discourse. Now, of course, shaping global economy requires a set of standard values and will be impossible, for example, if 3 billion people are excluded from a global market, or if half of the population of the world excluded from production, or if more than 1 billion people excluded from adequate consumption, when we have increasing gap between the rich and the poor. If there is no trust in the public and private sectors, there is a denial of basic rights. For example, in education, environment is not protected. There is unbalanced lifestyle, such as consumerism and materialism. There are corrupt institutions, and when nations form unions, but still member states looking after their own self-interest. So these problems need to be fixed. And now we have enough information, we have enough knowledge, there are economic policies, there are models, and all kinds of knowledge of economics are available at the academic level and at the political level. However, as the Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz said, with all this knowledge of economics that we have, we still have rich countries with poor people. And also, as another Nobel Prize winner, Amartya Sen, said that we have good ideas, but the process is wrong. So the world really is in a mess, and we still have a long way to go to establish the right process. So we Baha'is are a part of this mess. What we can do is to receive as little as possible from this mess and contribute as much as possible the vision of Bahá'u'lláh to solve the problems we have today. So the purpose of this presentation really is to go through some of the methods and alternative standard of ethics and morality that we require to fix the problems created by humanity. This is the plan for this presentation. After a brief introduction, we will look at the question if is there a Baha'i economic system, and then we will look at some of the distinctive Baha'i teachings on economics, and concluding with a number of remarks. Let's go with defining a number of key terms. Economy. The word economy comes from the Greek word oikonomia, that literally means the management of the house. Interestingly, Abdu'l-Baha has used the same conventional definition of economy in his writings. For example, here we see that Abdu'l-Baha said this household is not well managed, this household is not living under perfect law. A law must be given to this family by means of which all the members of this family will enjoy equal well-being and happiness. A definition for system, it is an interacting or interdependent group of items forming a unified whole. Most dictionaries define a system in a similar way. Here, for example, Oxford Dictionary defines this as a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnecting network or a complex whole. Therefore, a system comprises multiple components, including concepts, rules, principles, analysis, design, structure, purpose, behavior, time-based factor, some flexibility, planning, and implementation. And of course, these definitions are based on our current understanding in the literatures. The analogy of human body is used in the Baha'i writings as a unified and regularly interacting and interdependent system as a complex whole for viewing human society. In a tablet to Queen Victoria, for example, Baha'u'lláh wrote, regard the world as the human body. explaining the concept of human body, then Abdul Baha writes, in the human body, cooperation ensures the functioning of that system. Similarly, civilization can be seen as the outcome of a set of interactions among closely integrated yet diverse components. So in the human body as a system, if there is pain in one part of our body, the rest of the body suffers as well. Similarly, in human society, things like poverty, hunger, and displacement in one part of the world are the causes of pain and suffering in other parts of the world. Today, the concept of economics and economic systems have reached to a new level. Today, the term economic system have mainly three different levels. The first level is economic activities, and this includes hundreds of activities in areas such as agriculture, industries, trade, services, crafts, and so on. The second level is socioeconomic systems, and that also includes hundreds of activities of dominant economic systems of capitalism and socialism, and also mixed economies and organization of activities in each country, and responding to the three basic economic questions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And the third level is economic sciences of microeconomics, which started with Adam Smith in the classical economics, and macroeconomics, which started with John Maynard Keynes, and the components of economy for a national or a global economy. So today, the worldwide economic discipline is extremely complex and mostly technical, which requires specialists to deal with ups and downs and challenges of everyday fluctuation of economic activities. So based on this scenario and considering the key elements of a complex modern economy and complication of its technical aspects, the answer to is there a Baha'i economic system would be no. Supporting this view, Shoghi Effendi said Bahá'u'lláh did not bring a complete system of economics to the world. He also said the cause is not an economic system, nor its founders be considered as having been technical economists. The contribution of the faith to this subject is essentially indirect, as it consists of the application of the spiritual principles to our present-day economic system. Now, we'll continue this discussion and looking at the question in a different way. Will there be a Baha'i economic system? Responding to this, we will identify features and components of a system more appropriate to the Baha'i writings and the activities of the Baha'i community. The first feature of a system is that system is an organized and orderly set of principles. Of course, it is much easier to see this particular feature in a more scientific structure with formulas and data collected than in a social science structure such as economics. Now, a country chooses an economic system based on how an economy coordinates principles of production, distribution, consumption, and the flow of money. Now, in the Baha'i writings, there are a number of guidelines, mainly spiritual, in relation to these basic economic principles. However, these teachings are not in an organized and orderly manner. This will be the task of the future experts to study Baha'i writings in its totality and devise a system based on an organized and orderly set of principles. The second feature is that system is a functional group of interacting and interrelated components. It refers to the manner in which each component functions with other components of a system. Now, Baha'i teachings on economics yet need to be coordinated and linked together based on a given unified plan. Of course, there are short-term plans and long-term plans for applying Baha'i principles. For example, Baha'u'lláh has given us long-term plans such as equality of women and men, universal peace, a world government, and many more that requires a much longer time to achieve them. The Universal House of Justice, on the other hand, provides to the Baha'i community the short-term plans, currently known as the 5-year plan. The third feature is that system is a set of rules that govern and describe structure and behavior. In the current system of market economy, the assumption is that the market is self-regulating and can reach equilibrium automatically. Although this may be true in some circumstances, but the fact that there are numerous problems in the economy is an indication that the market is not self-regulating and does not reach equilibrium automatically. The existence of poverty, unemployment, wealth accumulation in the hands of few, and the existence of all kinds of negative externalities are the signs that the market does not reach to a balanced position by itself. And hence, there is a need for a government intervention to influence the behavior of individuals and business corporations and correct their market failure. Now, in the Baha'i writings, apart from supporting government intervention to correct all kinds of market failure through legislation, there are numerous ethical and spiritual principles that influence individuals and businesses to have a new way of thinking or to have a different lifestyle behavior. Therefore, the combination of market intervention and application of spiritual principles helps the self-regulating aspect of the market and of the whole economy. The fourth feature is that a system is described by its purpose and objective with coordinated methods and unified plan. A system should have a central objective. The objective can be divided into several subsystems or system models to be achieved on a set time-based factor. In the Baha'i community, having short-term and long-term plans results in a smooth process of achieving the central objective of unity. Economics is just a means to achieve this central objective. We are familiar with a number of models or subsystems that coordinate various activities in the Baha'i community in relation to its central purpose of unity. For example, the model of perfect democracy, which is decision-making process and voting, the model of Baha'i family life, the model of wealth creation and wealth redistribution, the model of gender equality, the model of Baha'i education, and the model of hospitality of the Universal House of Justice are some of the activities that working together to achieve this central objective of unity in the Baha'i community. And lastly, a feature is a system should convey its universal or holistic approach. It is concerned with how a system is tied together. The current dominant economic systems do not consider the well-being of the entire global population. For example, half of the population of the world farmers are not considered by the dominant economic systems of capitalism and socialism. The Baha'i vision is working for an ever-advancing civilization and service to humanity. There is a clear, universal, and holistic view with a multi-dimensional approach. Now, when we look at these features of a system and applying that to the Baha'i community and the Baha'i writings, this is the summary. The Baha'i community has a learning culture that is influenced by Baha'i writings and has a behavioral pattern towards life. Also, a substantial amount of planning and implementation comes from the grassroots population with a coordinated method of decision-making process, all components of a system. The Baha'i community has the main objective of unity, which is supported by subsystems with long-term and short-term plans that are time-based factors. There are Baha'i institutions at local, national, and international level guiding and supervising the implementation of plans with some flexibility. Again, components of a system. There are regularly interacting and interdependent groups of subsystems working together within the Baha'i community as parts of the whole mechanism, such as the coordination of financial aspects at local, national, and international level. And also, there is unity of thought and action in the Baha'i community. The vision is based on Baha'i writings, and therefore it does not create division in the Baha'i community. This aspect makes the system even more stable in the long run. So based on these features and components of features as of system and applying them to Baha'i community and the Baha'i writings, we may say that the answer to will there be a Baha'i economic system would be yes. Supporting this view, Shoghi Effendi said the International House of Justice will have, in consultation with economic experts, to assist in the formulation and evolution of the Baha'i economic system of the future. So yes, in a sense, that there are essential spiritual guidelines in the Baha'i writings to help future economists and experts to develop the Baha'i economic system under the guidance of the Universal House of Justice. However, it is too early to envisage the nature of the Baha'i economic system of the future. Shoghi Effendi said here that the economic teachings of the cause, though well known in their main outline, have not as yet been sufficiently elaborated and systematized. The Universal House of Justice, in their recent message, a very timely message, said that although Bahá'u'lláh does not set out in his revelation a detailed economic system, a constant theme throughout the entire corpus of his teachings is the reorganization of human society. Considering of this theme inevitably gives rise to questions of economics. Of course, the future order conceived by Bahá'u'lláh is far beyond anything that can be imagined by the present generation. Nevertheless, its eventual emergence will depend on strenuous effort by his followers to put his teachings into effect today. So at this time, Baha'is are engaged in building the spiritual foundation of the Baha'i civilization and Baha'i world order, of which the Baha'i economic system of the future is a part. The primary consideration, as Shoghi Effendi said here, is the spirit that has to permit our economic life, and this will gradually crystallize itself into definite institutions and principles that will help to bring about the ideal condition foretold by Bahá'u'lláh. I must say that, in fact, today, the view that economics is a pure technical science is beginning to change. In last 2-3 decades, numerous books and papers are written about the role of ethics and spirituality in the life of individuals, dealing with financial institutions and business corporations, and also dealing with issues such as climate change, consumer citizenship, human rights, and about a sustainable lifestyle. This is a statement from Shoghi Effendi. He said there are practically no technical teachings on economics in the cause. So what this means? The teachings of the Baha'i Faith do not operate in a way that economic variables interact with each other. Let me explain this with some examples. We know the idea that as price increases, quantity demanded decreases and vice versa. The question of how much a person should be paid, or the way systems behave, or the solution to poverty, or the way interest rates affect investment, these details are not discussed in the Baha'i writings. The Baha'i teachings, however, suggest what is morally right for individuals and firms, such as, for example, allowing charging a fair interest rate on loans, and that economic systems are immoral if there are extremes of wealth and poverty, rather than how an extreme might be defined. So a system, as Shoghi Effendi said, a system that prevents, among others, the gradual control of wealth in the hands of a few and the resulting state of both extremes of wealth and poverty. The conclusion for this first part of my presentation is that currently there is no such thing as Baha'i economic system. Baha'is should be careful not to devise a separate economic system at this time. The current definitions and characteristics of a system may not work with the Baha'i approach in the future. We can find components of a system based on community, universality, sustainability, morality and spirituality, and unity. None of the present systems may work for a Baha'i economic system with these components. We are currently engaged in the application of spiritual principles towards the evolution of the Baha'i economic system of the future. And for any Baha'i discourse, the assumption should be made that the Baha'i Faith is a religion and not an economic system. So this is the first part. The next few slides shows some of the guiding spiritual principles of the Baha'i Faith that should be considered by the future experts to devise an economic system that is fair, universal, and flexible. Please note that these principles are not in any order of importance or preference. A fundamental Baha'i concept is the spiritual reality of human being. The future hope of humanity is built on this fundamental principle. Abdul Baha said, in man there are two natures, his spiritual or higher nature and his material or lower nature. If a man's divine nature dominates his human nature, we have a saint. And Universal House of Justice, again in the recent message, said economic life is an arena for the expression of honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, generosity, and other qualities of the spirit. It should be noted that material and spiritual are, of course, two different things, and there is no need for the total acceptance of one and complete rejection of the other. Material part is necessary for development, but not sufficient on its own. We are not economic man, we are not machine, we have a soul, and our soul has the capacity to love. Real growth and development takes place when there is a coherence between these two. Today, what we see in the market economy is mostly related to this lower nature of human being that has led to consumerism and materialism. A feature of new globalization is that our world is interdependent and interrelated from every aspect. The recent global financial crisis is a clear example that people and nations are interdependent. The fact that we are having numerous international conferences is a sign that people have realized the need for each other. Abdul Baha said, for none is self-sufficiency any longer possible. Sorry that I don't read the entire quote. These slides will be available to you, and you can later on study and read them in your own good time. The House of Justice said the stresses emerging out of the long-term process of transition from a divided world to a united one are being felt within international relations. The universality of Baha'i economics signifies a holistic view of humanity and organization of human society. A number of statements by Bahá'u'lláh clearly emphasize the meaning and significance of this particular feature of Baha'i economics. I have chosen a few of these quotes for this slide. Baha'u'lláh said, we desire but the good of the world and the happiness of the nations. And he referred to the well-being of mankind. And he said, let your vision be world-embracing, and referring to the entire human race as one soul and one body. An important feature of Baha'i economics is that equity is preferred to equality. Absolute equality would be an obstacle to life, to welfare, and to order. The rationale behind this view is that human talents, education, capabilities, and natural abilities are different, and full economic equality will not be fair. Therefore, wage and income will be different. However, excessive wealth will be controlled and regulated. Shoghi Effendi said human beings are different in ability and should therefore be different in their social and economic standing. Although from an economic perspective, equity is preferred to equality, however, we are all equal in the sight of God and laws of the land. Equal opportunity must be provided to all to acquire necessary education and skills. In relation to the Baha'i community of Iran, the absence of equality, opportunity, and human rights have become barriers for Baha'i youths to have access to higher education and, as a result, acquiring a profession. And we know from an economic perspective, those with inadequate education and professionalism are less demanded in the labor market, and as a result, lower wage is paid. This kind of religious persecution and exclusion of Baha'i youths put the Baha'i community of Iran under heavy economic pressures, and of course, a disadvantage to the whole nation. The role of a just government, according to Abdul-Baha, is ensuring the integrity of the members of society and their equality before the law. Issues of economic justice are among the key factors discussed in the Baha'i writings. Baha'u'lláh said here, no light can compare with the light of justice. Now, if economics is defined as the best use of resources, and justice is defined as giving to each one what he or she is due, then the two principles of economics and justice are complementary functionally and morally. In the next passage here from Baha'u'lláh, he has made a distinction between mercy and justice. He said, O son of man, if thine eyes be turned towards mercy, forsake the things that profit thee, and cleave unto that which will profit mankind. And if thine eyes be turned towards justice, choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself. Now, justice is the basic of golden rule. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. Another moral principle stated in all faiths is the principle of mercy. Here we go an extra mile for others. Both justice and mercy are praised in the Holy Scriptures. We can follow anyone, but mercy requires a higher level of spirituality. One of the guiding principles of the Baha'i economics is the importance of cooperation. The argument in favor of cooperation in the Baha'i writings goes beyond the scope of market and the economy. The writings emphasize that cooperation and not relentless competition is the cause of social activities. Just as the life of a system is maintained by cooperation of the various elements of which it is composed. Here, Abdul-Baha said, the more the world aspires to civilization, and the more this important matter of cooperation becomes manifest. Promoting social interest rather than self-interest is another guiding principle. The Baha'i view is that the nature of human being is altruistic and not egoistic. If we act in a way that improves the well-being of others, it ultimately serves our own interest. Human beings should strive to reach to this level of understanding. Baha'u'lláh discourages his followers from egoistic activities and encourages them to pursue behaviors that benefit all. True self-interest is the well-being of humanity. Baha'u'lláh said, dissipate not the wealth of your precious lives in the pursuit of evil and corrupt affection, nor let your endeavors be spent in promoting your personal interest. Cling unto that which profited mankind. Excuse me. Wealth creation and wealth redistribution is another important subject in the Baha'i writings. Here, Baha'u'lláh said that having attained the stage of fulfillment, and reached his maturity, man standeth in need of wealth. Then Abdul-Baha, in The Secret of Divine Civilization, explained what are the source of wealth creation and how the wealth should be spent. He said that wealth is praiseworthy in the highest degree if it is acquired by an individual's own efforts and the grace of God in commerce, agriculture, arts, and industry, and if it be expended for philanthropic purposes. And then he said wealth is most commendable provided the entire population is wealthy. So wealth is praiseworthy. We see that the condition of wealth creation and wealth redistribution also is mentioned in the writings of Abdul-Baha. The Universal House of Justice said here that wealth is acceptable and praiseworthy to the extent that it serves as a means for achieving higher ends. And then a number of higher ends are mentioned here by the House of Justice: meeting one's basic necessities, fostering the progress of one's family, promoting the welfare of society, and for contributing to the establishment of a world civilization. This slide will show a practical guide for Baha'is to appreciate wealth. There are wealthy Baha'is that they may feel guilty when they see the poverty and destitution and miserable life of poverty among themselves. However, if a wealthy Baha'i, having attained the stage of fulfillment and reached his maturity, purifies one's riches, for example, by paying Bahá'u'lláh or the right of God, earns by one's own efforts, has compassion and caring for the poor, by being rich is not hindered from the eternal kingdom, performs philanthropic services, contributes with a willing heart without being forced to do it, does not let possessions possess him or her, paying taxes, consider tax as virtuous, spends money on what is befitting to human dignity, brings themselves to account each day, and to bring one's priority into balance, then a wealthy Baha'i does not need to have guilty feelings or apologize for being wealthy. Just a practical guide for our wealthy Baha'is. In the new globalization, as we see in this graph, increasing the wealth of the rich is much steeper than the decline of the poverty level. Although the poor are not getting poorer here in this graph and in the new globalization, but the rich are getting richer significantly, and hence the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. And this is the concern of the Baha'i writings, and therefore advocating the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty. Of course, absolute poverty will be eliminated. In fact, it is predicted that by 2030, there will be zero absolute poverty in the world, and this is a very good news for all of us. The concept of work has a special place in the Baha'i writings. Work has material implication, now has been elevated to the spiritual rank. The central figures of the Baha'i Faith have referred to the concept of work when done in a spirit of service as worship. Work for a Baha'i is a means to serve others. Therefore, there is a close correlation between the concept of work as worship and service to humanity. Here, Bahá'u'lláh said, you are the trees of my garden. You must give forth goodly and wondrous fruits, that ye yourselves and others may profit therefrom. And the House of Justice said, the poor are urged by Bahá'u'lláh to exert themselves and strive to earn the means of livelihood. and the rich are urged by Baha'u'lláh to have the utmost regard for the poor. In any alternative model of economics of the future, agriculture should play a major role, which has been ignored mostly by the current dominant economic systems. Baha'u'lláh said special regard must be paid to agriculture. And Abdul Baha said it is fitting that the economic problems be first solved with the farmer, for the farmer is the first active agent in the body politic. But why this special regard for agriculture? An obvious comment here is that food is a prerequisite for human development. It would be almost impossible to do anything without food. The Baha'i Faith will maintain a balance of two dominant economic systems of capitalism and socialism. Shoghi Effendi here said private ownership will be retained, but will be controlled, regulated, and even restricted. Complete socialization is not only impossible, but most unjust. In the laissez-faire, absolute freedom leads to confusion and corruption. This is what really we see today in the world. And then he said the cause in the future will maintain the right balance between the two systems. The House of Justice said there is no justification for continuing to perpetuate structures, rules, and systems that manifestly fail to serve the interest of all people. The next slide shows a Baha'i view on market economy. The fact that most economies today are towards the market economy, it is interesting to know what is the Baha'i perspective on the market economy. We know that Baha'u'lláh has permitted charging interest rate on financial loans. A uniform and universal system of currency is recommended. A progressive income tax is supported in the Baha'i writings, and the writings support government expenditure on improving social welfare. For those of you who have done economics at university, you know that usually governments have two main policies to deal with economic condition of their country. One is monetary policy, which includes interest rate and currency, and then they also have fiscal policy, which is taxation and government expenditure. It is very interesting that in the Baha'i writings we have guidelines, mainly spiritual guidelines about both monetary policy and fiscal policy. Abdul Baha also approves and encourages commercial activities, which is one aspect of market economy. The conditions of wealth creation and wealth redistribution is mentioned in the writings, and also Abdul Baha has endorsed profit sharing. A number of references are given here at the bottom of this slide. Especially, I recommend to read an article written by my very close friend, Professor Farhad Rasikh, the Baha'i Faith and the Market Economy, an excellent paper about the Baha'i perspective on market economy. There are a number of economic principles in the writings for making right choices. In economic textbooks, there is a discussion about economic problems, and reference is given to scarcity and therefore the need to make choices. In the Baha'i writings, there are these principles and maybe more to help us for making decisions about our choices. For example, consumer education, the quality of information one uses to make decisions directly affects producers and the ability of the market to meet the society's collective needs. The principle of harmony between science and religion helps consumers to appreciate and become conscious of the benefits of goods and services. The consciousness and realization of the oneness of humankind is another principle. Simply means thinking of the poor when we are making choices, thinking of the well-being of the future generation when we are making choices, and also thinking on preserving and protecting the nature when we are making choices. The Universal House of Justice states that our economic decisions must be in accordance with lofty ideals. The independent investigation of truth helps us to use the right product and not to be influenced by false media impression and false advertisement and promotional activities. A Baha'i model of consultation, and we know that according to Baha'i writings, consultation is encouraged in all aspects of life, including decisions about the three basic economic questions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Moderation. The Baha'i view of moderation can be expressed as eliminating extremes of wealth and poverty. Moderation limits the size of business operation. The recent global financial crisis is a good example that some businesses became so large that when they failed, the entire market suffered. Moderation creates a normal life for all people. A couple of years ago, I met the Nobel Prize winner, Professor Muhammad Yunus of Bangladesh, at his office. We had a couple of hours discussion on issues related to poverty alleviation in that country. One of the questions that I asked Professor Yunus was, how do you explain the success of Bangladesh and similar nations in wealth creation and poverty reduction since 1980? Now, I mentioned 1980 because Bangladesh that time was one of the poorest countries in the world, almost at the lowest point of the list of United Nations from economic development. The answer Professor Yunus gave should be very interesting to our Baha'i friends. Now, when we look at this list of answer from Professor Yunus, we also should remember some of the Baha'i teachings. So, increasing the enrollment of girls in schools, women empowerment, and in fact, Grameen Bank, whose founder is Professor Yunus, have done a great job for improving the women empowerment, reducing income inequality through government policies, transformations in the agricultural sector, some progress in reducing corruption, microcredit finance and the role of a moderate interest rate. Again, Grameen Bank has done an excellent job supporting more than 7 million families by giving them a loan with a moderate interest rate. Significant success in population management due to education of girls and women empowerment. The role of international trade, empowering human rights, and the significant role of higher education. So we see that even at this early stage of the development of the Baha'i Faith, communities and nations and organizations, knowingly or unknowingly, benefiting from Baha'i teachings in improving standards of living and social progress. Well, with that, we come to end of this presentation, and let me end this presentation with a number of remarks. One of the central concepts in the Baha'i Faith is the view that social structures are constantly changing, and so no single economic theory is always going to be suitable for the world. At this point of time, Baha'is should be cautious not to create a separate economic system. We know to some extent the Baha'i writings, we know principles, but we are still too far away to see the picture clearly. The main priority at this time is engaging in the spiritual foundation of economics of the future within the Baha'i community and to infuse this into the wider society. And finally, Baha'is all over the world enthusiastically join the work and work closely with any group or organization that promotes values such as trustworthiness, truthfulness, justice, and service to humanity. These core values enlighten any economic system now and in the future. Friends, I have added to this presentation a number of references from the Baha'i International community. These are excellent material to read about this subject. And thank you very much for listening to this presentation.